how to become carbon heroes.
Fantastic title.
Welcome back. Let me know if the audio isn't exactly to your liking. We have some nice gentle fire sounds and some nice rain sounds. And today we're going to be talking with Daniel Hadley of Carbon Croc, which is an interview I'm really excited about. I found out about Carbon Croc because I had written a couple blog posts a while back and reposted things about the kind of power of carbon offsetting, especially on an individual level, as compared, which I personally think is more effective than some of the top-down strategies that seem to have failed as far as trying to improve carbon emissions. As top-down strategies, there's always going to be a new regime change or an administrative change. It's the same with like Walmart didn't start stocking organic until the individual people wanted it, right? That's a different kind of example. But what you can do as an individual matters. And Mr. Hadley's going to talk with us a little bit about Carbon Croc. They reached out to me on Twitter, and I became more and more interested in their product and their program as I was launching some stuff with my store. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into Carbon Croc, what is carbon offsetting, and what is Carbon Croc?
Sure. So just to introduce myself super quickly, my name's Dan. From the accent, you can probably hear that I come from the other side of the Atlantic. So my parents are from the UK, but I grew up in France and currently dog sitting my sister's dog in Madrid. I started Carbon Croc, that's wrong, I actually started a different company about a year ago. And this company, it was a green travel company. And I'm sure you guys remember there was this worldwide pandemic last year. So you can imagine what a roaring success that company was. And over the winter, me and my co-founder Paul, we were kind of thinking about different ideas and looking at what was happening around us. And there was a lot of stuff in the media about e-commerce and how everybody is buying online today and the impact that has on the environment. So we started to read up statistics about the millions and millions of tons of packaging that was being shipped everywhere, products going 3 times around the world before arriving at your front door, plastic piling up, delivery vans, spewing carbon into the atmosphere. And we realized that there's something there that needs to be changed. There's something there that needs to be done. So we came up with a very simple hypothesis, which is what if we could make every delivery carbon neutral for a start, and then over time, maybe even make the whole product carbon neutral. So maybe to give a quick definition of carbon neutrality, for anybody that doesn't know, carbon neutrality is when you have a product or a service that emits less carbon than is removed from the same process. So that means you can calculate the amount of CO2 that a product or service emits. So for example, I drive 1 mile in my car, that will emit, for example, 1 kilo of CO2. I know you guys don't do kilos in the US, but I think everybody can follow me.
We all do in the scientific community, and everyone here has familiarity with that.
And so in order to neutralize that impact, what you can do is you can either switch to an electric car, for example. So then when you drive 1 mile in an electric car, it won't emit any carbon. Or alternatively, you can also neutralize it by investing in a carbon offset. So a carbon offset, there's so many different kinds of projects, so many different kinds of offsets. The most basic one that everybody can relate to is if I plant a tree in my garden, as that tree grows, it will breathe in CO2 from the atmosphere and give out O2, oxygen. So by planting that tree and letting that tree grow, you are removing carbon from the atmosphere.
You're literally balancing out the process, which is phenomenal, because a lot of times, especially people of lower economic status, electric cars are still not, at least in the US, really available or affordable for people who have very little income and with bad infrastructure, like in the US. I know I love traveling in Japan and Korea because people don't really need cars. The public transportation is so smooth, but in places of the world where there isn't that option of public transportation and people still have to work, carbon offsetting kind of gives the individual power that otherwise they economically don't have. So it's awesome.
Exactly.
What are the projects that you're most excited about that Carbon Croc is kind of working with?
So today we work with several different projects. We do work with a tree planting project because it's what a lot of people understand and can relate to. But we do also support projects which are slightly bigger. So these are projects that have all been vetted and certified by carbon standards such as Gold Standard or ETS Vera, which are the two big carbon auditors in the world. And what these projects usually try and do is have an environmental component, which means that they take carbon out of the atmosphere, but also a social or an educational or an economic component as well. So one of my favorite projects that we support is a project for providing clean water filters to rural communities in Laos. So I don't know if you know, but in Laos, clean drinking water is very difficult to find. So, lots of people drink it, get diarrhea or other waterborne diseases because the water is of very poor quality. So what they do today, in order to try and make it safer to drink, is that they will go to the forest, they will cut down trees, they will have an open fire, usually inside of the house, so there's lots of smoke inside the house, and they boil the water to get rid of the bacteria. And this is obviously highly inefficient. In more developed countries, we don't need to boil water anymore in order to drink it. So this project that we support, what it does is it funds water filters for these rural communities. And for each water filter provided, that means that one family no longer needs to go out, cut down their forests, doesn't need to burn this wood anymore, which spews CO2 into the atmosphere. And so they have a healthier environment, they're breathing in their smoke, and they get clean drinking water. So you have on the one side the social and economic benefit, but also you're removing carbon from the atmosphere. And that's very, very easily measurable, and it's audited by a carbon certifier. So you know that for every dollar invested, you're going to be removing carbon from the atmosphere.
And I think that brings up a very important connection. I think, unfortunately, in certain political circles, human health and the health of the environment have been kind of pitted against each other. People have talked about how it's going to be the economy or it's going to be trees. It's like people or trees, and we're going to choose people. And unfortunately, I think that's because of how it's been politicized, because you have political groups who talk one way or another and just don't do very good with their messaging. But in reality, the industry is most benefited, people's health is most benefited when we have a lot of these bottom-up carbon neutral options and solutions. So I'm a physician and the director actually of the Headwaters column of the Wilderness Medicine Society in the United States, which is the environmental column. And we actually just put out a piece about, which we mentioned Carbon Croc in, by the way, about how carbon offsetting directly contributes to human health. And these are all things that can be done on the individual level. Can you tell us a little bit more about the individual process as someone, because we talk about carbon offsetting, but people are probably wondering, okay, so how do I do that? What is Carbon Croc with that? I know I interrupted you a little bit when you were about to go into that. But how do they directly enter into this process of, for example, helping somebody out in Laos or planting a tree without going out and doing it themselves?
Yeah, definitely going out and doing it yourself is great, but it's highly inefficient. Unfortunately, we're not all master foresters. I wish we all were. It'd be fun. But like you said, just to bounce back on the point on how the environment and society and health kind of interplay with each other. I think it's something that has kind of entered the general zeitgeist today. That after the pandemic, people have kind of taken a step back and realized that our relationship with nature is highly linked. And we need to be more conscious of how we live and the things we do in our day to day. In terms of individual offsetting, so me as an individual, over time I've been tracking my carbon footprint, and I've been trying to reduce it over time. So I eat less meat. I don't eat any meat anymore, actually. I eat less fish. I eat mostly a vegetarian diet. I use public transport. I love to cycle. It's outdoor, it's fresh, it's fun. I fly a lot less than I used to. And it's all these little things that can reduce my individual carbon footprint on the planet. But there is always that inevitable footprint of, when you do need to take a car, or, you're buying food that's being shipped across the world. I enjoy eating some fruits that are exotic fruits, and, that does have a carbon footprint, right? And so I've been thinking about ways of how I can offset that impact so that my impact as a human on this planet is neutral or even negative. And one of the easiest ways to do this is with a carbon calculator. You can input some data. There's loads of them online. They're really fantastic. Not just Carbon Croc. Type it into Google and you'll find loads of great ones. And you can calculate your personal footprint, and then usually you get an offer to offset it. So this is one of the services that we provide. We wanted to build it as a subscription service, because we feel like that's, people are so used to that today. You subscribe to Netflix, you subscribe to Amazon Prime, and you can also subscribe to Carbon Crop. What that means is that every month, for as little as, I'll need to check, but I think $10, you can offset your whole carbon footprint for the year. And, it's just, you need to click one button and it's done. We didn't want to make it difficult for people. We just wanted it to be clear. This is the service that we provide. It's super easy to do, so there's no reason not to do it, really.
And in that case, I think with the subscription service, what you're doing is calculating it based on a person's average, right? Because since they're not going in individually and entering in all of their specific carbon expenditures, which is what a lot of calculators do. In the case of Carbon Croc, you're taking an average, and then they can pay $10 a month, and that should offset, what they're producing for the year. Is that correct? Is that kind of a...
That is correct. We had a few discussions in the team about it, and also did a bit of research, and we found that the calculation tool for a lot of people was a barrier, because they're unsure about the data that they're entering. It takes time,
so long.
You've got to break it down, and so we thought we'll do an average. We'll make it easy for everybody, and then over time, if you're already subscribed and you want to rectify it over time, then that's something that you can do, and we'd be super happy to help you calculate your precise individual footprint.
I think also when you mentioned, kind of bouncing back to when you mentioned like talking about things like exotic fruit or other things like that, thinking about how to go carbon neutral. I think that's one reason that so many, you're talking about barriers to entry, right? You're clearly being cognizant of like what makes it convenient for a person to be able to go carbon neutral. And one problem, and I think one big barrier, is that people's mental health in a lot of ways hasn't been respected by a lot of people within the environmental science community. I mean, there is this almost religious judgmentalism that people see, that people feel when they are interacting with, the idea of trying to go carbon neutral. They think it's going to be impossible. What this person wants me to do is, not be able to have a job because I can't have a car and walk because I can't afford a Tesla. And then this person wants me to never eat anything that I didn't grow. And there tends to be this inaccurate barrier that's created because of the way certain advocates have kind of been very judgmental in their attitudes. And so the idea of kind of a non-judgmental way that you can go in and, hey, I can fix this, I can contribute, I can make things better for myself and for my children, for the future, or if you don't have children, for other people's children, for the children of your pets in the future, right? I can leave a good impact on the planet, and it doesn't have to be difficult and miserable because my mental health matters too. I'm sure that during times of isolation, getting exotic fruit from around the world, helps you to feel better. And people who have severe mental health illnesses, a lot of times deal with a lot of guilt. And so receiving another guilt on top of everything, like, oh, also I shouldn't even exist on this planet because my net existence is bad, my human existence is bad. There tends to be this very kind of judgmental anti-human trend sometimes in the way we communicate. And so the idea, instead of I can take care of my mental health and have things that bring me joy, I can have a positive net impact on the planet, and since you mentioned even going carbon negative, and it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be the end of the world. Here on the Becoming a Real Life Superhero channel, I'm a big advocate of like being willing to suffer for what matters to you. So sometimes we do have to give things up in order to make things better, but on the other hand, efficiency. I love how you keep talking about efficiency. Like, there's no reason to have meaningless suffering and slowness. We can get things done efficiently. Can you talk a little bit more about where people can see Carbon Croc as well in business applications?
Sure. So the one of the original tools that we designed with Carbon Croc is an application for e-commerce merchants. So as I was saying earlier, when we were thinking about starting Carbon Croc with my co-founder Paul, we realized that this was a big issue with a lot of the e-commerce platforms, is that they didn't have a way necessarily to communicate to their customers that they wanted to make a difference. So, as a small business, imagine you're a coffee roaster and you roast bags of coffee. That's your business, that's your expertise, and you will spend your time roasting coffee, right? You don't know how to make it more sustainable. You don't know how to get those touch points with your customers in order to have a more positive impact on the planet. So that's the solution that we try to come up with, is kind of like, you're the expert in your business, you keep doing that, and we will accompany you on your sustainability journey.
Exactly.
So we now have this widget, which any e-commerce merchants can install on their website, which allows either them or their end customer to be able to make their orders carbon neutral. So what we do on our end is we'll measure the environmental impact of every product sold, and then at the end of every month, we help you invest in a carbon sink so that every order made is carbon neutral.
And the merchant can either do that through the Shopify platform on their end. They can check and see what those numbers are and pay. Or the merchant can also, which I like this because I like to give the customer the option to be part of it. There's also like a front facing where the customer, when they go to checkout, has an option, as I understand correctly, to add a little bit to offset the carbon of their order.
Exactly.
Which is awesome.
That's right.
I think that's super cool. So,
and just to bounce off that, I think it's something that we need to be conscious of is, we do buy stuff, like you said, we buy stuff online, and it does get shipped, and sometimes it's in plastic, and it's, it comes in a delivery van that's not electric. But that's fine, because that's the world that we live in today. We live in a highly capitalist and consumerist society, and these are the comforts that we have become accustomed to. And it's not tomorrow that we're all going to start growing our own food in our back gardens, like you said, and not have access to all these wonderful riches that we do today online. So it's I think the solution there is really is how do you take what we have already and improve on it, and say, okay, let's be aware of our carbon impact, let's be transparent about it, and let's be honest, as businesses, as consumers, and say, hey, my business does have a carbon footprint, but that doesn't matter because it's inevitable, right? So I'm going to do everything I can to reduce it, and if possible, neutralize it. And I think that's the way forward for me.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things I like about a lot of the projects that are verified by the gold standard, for example, is there's also a step beyond almost this, because in some ways carbon offsetting is a little bit of a penance. It's a little bit like, I'm not Catholic, and I certainly respect all Catholics, but I understand that there's used to be in the medieval era system where you've done something wrong and therefore you do penance and you make up for it, you balance yourself out. Sometimes carbon offsetting can be a little bit like penance, but what I like about gold standard and other projects, and projects a lot of times under that umbrella, is a lot of times we're trying to move beyond penance to carbon offsetting using projects that actually also advance technology in a direction. So maybe one day we won't have all these problems with plastics. Like maybe one day we can have biodegradable wrappings that become a very regular thing, or maybe because when you're talking about like projects with water, sometimes when you have filters going out, how do we, replacement and other kinds of things like that on a long-term basis, how do we change the worldwide global water situation so that, for example, we're doing, can we teach people and educate people on things like solar distillery or other ways that we can continue to move technology forward so that we are not needing to produce as much carbon in general. And so what I like is that carbon offsetting isn't just penance, but often it is a way to contribute to, I think I'm repeating myself, but moving the bar forward so that we're actually progressing as human beings. And in some ways, one problem that we talk about often is how difficult it is to offset medical costs. Air quality improved a lot, to my understanding, during the pandemic because of less travel. However, waste, is through the roof with everyone using hospital PPE, and you keep to throw away the next thing. So, who is going to be the technological, hero that then advances us into where, what? Can we make biodegradable PPE? That's very difficult at this point in time because human health is a problem, right? If you're thinking about, to those of you at home, I see you all here here in the chat, talking back and forth, thinking about ways that you can come up with a new idea. I mean, it's so awesome, like Daniel and Paul coming up with this way to use technology to make something more available to everybody. So that's kind of my next question for you, Daniel, is, so we've talked about how people can use tools like Carbon Croc to, improve their impact. Let's switch a little bit and talk a little bit about entrepreneurial spirit and how they can come up with their own next big idea, right? Carbon Croc is your big idea. What ways did you and your team get to where you are coming up with these big ideas? Like, for example, I would love to see a supermarket chain that would come up with their big idea of, instead of shipping out things in cans and jars, what if people came and refilled their cans and jars of their things right there in the supermarket, right? Which they still do in Paraguay. Like, you bring your cola bottle back to the store and you refill your cola bottle right there. You don't have to keep using things. It's like, that would be a big idea. I'd like to see a supermarket chain do that. That would get rid of plastic waste. It would be cheaper for the supermarket. It would be cheaper for the suppliers because you have less stuff. So how do people come up with their next big idea, their Carbon Croc? How did you kind of go about that process?
I think that's a really great question, and one that can't really be answered honestly, because there's so many different factors that come into play, right? For me, one of the biggest factors is just speaking to people, speaking to people around you, getting exposed to different ideas, different types of knowledge, different ways of viewing the world. And the more people that you talk to, the more you can understand what their problems are, what their fears are, what their dreams are. And over time, you kind of start to create these ideas of how you as an individual can make the world better. And then you speak to people about your ideas, and they give you feedback, and they say, no, that's awful, that's rubbish, that's never going to work. And you iterate on it, right? And the more you iterate on it, the better that idea will become. And over time, it will start to be more and more refined. And then you'll realize at some stage, you're like, hey, this is actually something that might work. And this is something that's possible. And I think then you just need to, you just need to go for it and not be shy. And to be honest, if you think it's a good idea, then in 99% of the cases, it is a good idea. And even if people still underestimate you or think that it's not good enough, if you have the confidence that you can make a difference, then you just need to go out and do that, right? Um, there's so many people out there, like yourself, lots of business owners that I've spoken to, who have these fascinating visions for a more sustainable future. And that's one of my favorite parts of my job, is being able to spend the time to speak to all these wonderful people who do have these magical visions of the future. And if that kind of sounds like you, if that's something that resonates with you, then don't be afraid, just go out there, implement whatever it is that you have in mind, and start making that difference today. Because to be honest, there will be people there to support you and push you along that journey.
That's awesome. Oh, I love that. That was so great. Let me check and see if we have any questions from folks, but I really, really like that whole thing, and so I can't even comment on it because that's going to be perfect for the channel. So people, we have kind of a lively discussion. Everybody kind of talking about a couple jokes. Do they make Crocs shoes from carbon emissions? Is that where carbon
we
recyclable
thought
Crocs? Balance. Yeah, talking about have balance in life, and kind of the reason offsetting kind of helps to provide that balance. More joking. It's sad. Just missing bits and pieces. I think your explanation was great, Unigoto. Somebody was summarizing for somebody else. Do you folks have any final questions for Daniel? And Daniel, do you have any final shout outs or information that you'd like to give us? The name of the organization, Unigoto, is Carbon Croc, since you missed the beginning.
Yeah. So carbon like your carbon footprint, and croc like a crocodile.
Or like the Croc
the
shoes.
behind is we wanted, or like the or like the Crocs. And the reason we picked that is because we want to take a massive crocodile-sized bite out of the climate crisis. And so feel free to join us on our journey to do so, because it's only thanks to you guys and all the great partners that we have that we're going to be able to achieve this mission. My personal mission is to remove 1 million tons of CO2 from the atmosphere. And it's only thanks to great people like you that we'll be able to achieve that.
That's awesome. And I know you're a very new company still, but may I ask how far you are into that journey?
We're quite far.
That's awesome.
We're at roughly 200 tons removed today.
Okay.
So it's quite far from 1 million, but we want to make it very scalable, and essentially the more people that join on board, the faster we'll go. So
200 tons is a lot, though. That's awesome. That's really, really good. And you're very, very new, and this is something you're hoping to continue doing for the next 20, 30 years, if I'm correct, right? You're not hoping on you're going to ditch this and move on to something else. Because it sounds like you're making really big lifestyle changes too. So I mean, it sounds like you're kind of in this for the long haul.
Exactly, and I think we've all read in the papers how a lot of the the megacorps, the kind of the Microsofts and the Amazons and the Apples of this world have said they're going to be carbon neutral by 2050. That's the year that we've got earmarked for being carbon neutral.
Yeah.
But 2050 is still 30 years away. So I thought, why not start making that difference today?
Yes.
And maybe we'll get there sooner.
Well, and small businesses, it's a lot easier to go carbon neutral. I mean, our little tea business only gets a couple orders a month. That's pretty easy to offset. So, people can start out carbon neutral basically with this kind of stuff. So,
and I think today, more and more that's going to be the norm, and we need to keep on going in that direction.
Absolutely. Do you people can find you on your website, right? They can also just Google Carbon Croc, or if they are a business owner, they can go to the Shopify app store and type in Carbon Croc as well. Where else? And then on Twitter, it's at Carbon Croc, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Anywhere else I've missed?
Instagram is the most active account. So if you go to carbon_croc, you'll be able to find us there.
And that's Instagram?
That's on Instagram, yes.
Okay, perfect.
So that's our most active social media account to date. But always, if you have any feedback or ideas that you want to share, just feel free to shoot me an email as well. My email address is Dan, DAN, @carboncroc.com. And any ideas, any feedback, any stories that you want to tell, feel free to just shoot me a message.
That's phenomenal. Well, I know it's late where you are, and I don't want to keep you on too much longer. I think we may already have gone a little bit over what I had promised. I told you it was going to be short, half an hour. So I'll let you go. I very much appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. And any one last thing before I cut you off the server?
Oh, listen, it's been really great to talk with you. It's been an absolute pleasure to be here. I really enjoyed this little chat that we had, and I'm really looking forward to listening to the future heroes that you're going to be interviewing, because I'm sure you're going to find some great stories and some great people to talk to.
Well, so thank you. I appreciate that, and I appreciate that little kind of shout out in there, because folks can hear about a lot of amazing people up on the channel. We have a woman who, she's rescued more people than Batman ever did. She has 75 orphans that she individually took care of through a war zone in Liberia. We have a kid who's managed to succeed with his college dreams and is now trying to help others despite being shot in the back at 13 years old. Lots of crazy things. They all have that twist, like what you offered there at the end, of how to come up with your own ways to learn and then become your own hero, find your own little space in this world that needs every single one of you so much. So thank you again so much, Dan, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful night. And of course, we'll be in touch, and I'll send you the links when this all goes live. Or it is live when it goes live again a second time. And we'll be emailing it out as well. So thank you very much for your time.
Cheers.